Okay, let's jump over and talk about the receivers. Again, this is going to be a week that people want to blow their fab on receivers, namely on Justin Jefferson. Justin Jefferson is our top guy on the week, but I'm not looking to go too crazy. We already saw how quickly everyone abandoned the Minnesota Vikings offense after one really terrible performance, but still was 1 week. Everyone's out on Kirk Cousins. People are freaking out over Adam Thielen. People are freaking out on this offense in general. Justin Jefferson turns around and posts up a 7 for 9, 175 yards, and 1 touchdown. Absolute dominant performance, and he did a lot of that playing in the perimeter, which is really good because one of the things that we were fearful with Justin Jefferson was he got the majority of his work done in the slot throughout college, rarely played out wide, and coming into a Minnesota Vikings team that very rarely has a slot receiver because of the amount of times they run 2 tight end sets, we were concerned that Justin Jefferson was going to take some time to be acclimated to the NFL. Well, apparently the time that it took for him to become acclimated to playing outside was 3 weeks because he was absolutely dominant against the Titans. They've been pretty porous against receivers up to this point. So again, not trying to read too much into this, but Justin Jefferson was definitely dominant enough that he warrants the number 1 target on waivers this week. If he's out there looking to throw a 15% fab on him, if someone wants to blow their entire budget on him, let them go ahead. We know this is a low pass volume team. This is an offense that runs through Dalvin Cook. Adam Thielen is still going to be the number 1 option there. So I'm not going to blow my fab on the number 2 option in a low pass volume team, but he looked good. So hopefully that helps you navigate that a little bit. Alshon Jeffery, if he's out there and your league mates have forgotten about him, it's like the 15th year in a row that every single person on the Eagles seems to be hurt. We've got Jalen Reagor is out for an indefinite period of time with his thumb injury. Deshaun Jackson is now dealing with an injury. Greg Ward was the leading receiver there again, which is what we saw at the end of last year. Dallas Goedert is going to be out for a few weeks. So if Alshon Jeffery comes back, he's at least coming back into a situation where he is going to be the number 1 receiver, pretty much just by nature of attrition and everyone going down around him. I don't know what he has left. He looked pretty washed and toasted by the end of last year. So it's not like if he's out there, I'm not like, oh my gosh, I need to make sure I roster Alshon Jeffery, but it's worth the shot. If this offense does turn things around, which we've seen them do before, we've seen them come out with slow starts and turn things around midway through the season, or if Jalen Hurts takes over and he ends up being the next best thing at the quarterback position, then Alshon Jeffery could end up seeing his value rise that way. So if he's out there, you should be going after him. He's the second best guy we have on the week. All right, and then we had this massive tier, this group of guys that I'm just honestly throwing my hands up and saying, take your shot on who you think is the best option here. Allen Lazard blew dust in the face of everyone that spent money on Marquez Valdes-Scantling this week. Allen Lazard goes off for 6 catches on 8 targets for 146 yards and a touchdown. Looked really slow, to be honest. Like how he didn't score on that massive touchdown made no sense to me. But it doesn't matter. He has the trust of Aaron Rodgers. And Aaron Rodgers has actually thrown more touchdowns, and this offense has scored more points than at any point in his career. So even though their defense looks like it's regressed some, Packers offense is on fire right now. Devontae Adams is most likely coming back in week 4. They get to play the Falcons, which is another plus matchup. I don't know how much you can be able to trust Allen Lazard week to week. As long as Devontae and Aaron Jones are healthy, those are going to be the main 2 options in that offense. But again, if they're going to have to score this many points to hang with their opposing teams, Allen Lazard should be rostered at this point. Preston Williams is a guy you might be able to sneak this week because no one's paying attention to him. He only had 2 catches for 7 yards on Thursday night, but he did have a touchdown. And then the other thing to note about Preston Williams is he faces the Seahawks. We've already talked about this with Ryan Fitzpatrick, but the fact that the Seahawks are giving up the number 1 most points to fantasy opposing receivers, Preston Williams could be in for a really nice week this week. If you need a spot, like a quick spot start, look for Preston Williams on your waiver. T. Higgins looks like he has taken over for that AJ Green role. I don't know that that's going to continue. AJ Green was shadowed by Darius Slay this last week, so there's a reason to believe that AJ Green will rebound from this week. But T. Higgins looked like he was becoming that number 1 option on the perimeter with Tyler Boyd there in the slot. T. Higgins went 5 for 9. for 40 yards, but 2 touchdowns. So again, the predominant red zone target there. He also had some red zone targets in the previous week against the Browns. So T. Higgins is looking like he is becoming quickly that red zone target there for Joe Burrow. Randall Cobb had himself a nice week, 4 for 4, 95 yards and a touchdown. The target distribution in Houston is disgusting right now. We have like a pretty even split between Cobb and Will Fuller and Brandon Cooks. David Johnson's not too involved in the passing game at this point. You're always going to see Deshaun Watson take a couple shots at the tight ends in the red zone. So this is probably not going to be a very consistent play, but at least Randall Cobb has looked like he can perform well in that offense. So if Will Fuller or Brandon Cooks eventually goes down, Randall Cobb should see his value go up. Greg Ward had a really good week. Just in case Alshon Jeffery is completely toasted, maybe Greg Ward ends up being the number 1 wide receiver, which that shouldn't be the case in the NFL, but that's just how it goes. Greg Ward went 8 for 11. He had 11 targets, 72 yards, and a touchdown this last week. And then Brandon Aiyuk coming in there and doing his best Deebo Samuel impersonation, 5 for 8 for 70 yards, but also had 3 carries on the ground for 31 yards and a touchdown. Honestly, that's where most of his value is going to come from. We kind of knew that too. Same thing with Deebo Samuel. Never going to see a crazy amount of targets, but the fact that he's used in the rushing game gives him a higher floor, especially if he's able to break a long one again like he did. Deebo should be back in the next couple weeks, but you might be able to get another nice start out of Brandon Aiyuk this next week facing the Eagles. We also have some tier 3 guys we want to talk about here. Again, deeper leagues, depending on the format here. Andy Isabella had himself a nice day. 4 catches on 4 targets for 47 yards and 2 touchdowns. I mean, when Christian Kirk comes back, I don't know what kind of role Andy Isabella is going to have. To me, he looks like the clear better player between Isabella and Kirk, but apparently the Cardinals don't feel that way. Andy Isabella had only run 14 routes prior to this last week, so I think this was like probably the best you will see from Andy Isabella, and he could just be a flash in the pan. But if Christian Kirk misses another week, they play the Panthers this week, so Andy Isabella could be an interesting streamer again. Cole Beasley had himself a nice day, 6 for 7 and 100 yards. With John Brown dealing with a thigh injury, I believe, Cole Beasley could be in line for some more work. So he's probably someone that's worth rostering at this point, especially if you have John Brown and you need to pivot off of him in case he doesn't play this week. Gabriel Davis also saw a pretty decent week, 4 for 4 and 81 yards. He's a rookie. He ended up getting that crappy pass interference call, so he effectively won the game for the Bills this week. Not someone I'd be going out of my way for, but if you're in a super deep league, Gabriel Davis is an interesting name to look at. People are going to freak out over Mecole Hardman. He had 6 targets this week after barely seeing any work in the past 2 weeks. 4 catches for 81 yards and a touchdown. I still feel like this is the constant Hail Mary play. If you have Mecole Hardman, you basically are playing with fire every single time because he could come out and have 0 points for you, or he could have a night like this. So if you want to play with that fire, go ahead and go after Mecole Hardman, but that's not something I'm going to do. Exact same thing with Chase Claypool. Has had a few really nice deep targets, had a really good game last week, 3 for 3 and 81. But this is more so just in case Deontay Johnson is out. I think Chase Claypool becomes an interesting stream this week. My guess is Deontay Johnson will clear the concussion protocol and be back for week 4, and Chase Claypool will continue to stay on your bench. But just something to monitor. Both Juju and Deontay Johnson have dealt with injuries a lot up to this point in their career, so having Chase Claypool as an option for a Ben Roethlisberger-led offense, something you might want to consider. And then Zach Pascal, as I kind of mentioned, talking to you there about T.Y. Hilton, basically just became the number 2 receiver with Pittman and Campbell going down for extended time with injuries. He's not someone that is great for fantasy, but he's going to see targets in an offense that we're going to see more points scored from the Colts very soon. Their schedule gets a lot harder going forward. I think a lot of people are sleeping on the Colts right now because they just got to play the Vikings and the Jets. The Vikings, again, had no answers for them, and the Jets were just absolutely abysmal at this point. So don't sleep on the Colts. Better days are ahead for fantasy points being scored in that offense.